Hey there, hope you're doing fine. In that video I will talk about the audio reactive effects number 3 for Unreal Engine. So specifically about the update for 5.2. So I haven't made a video about that pack yet, so there is no tutorial or video where I show off all the assets. If you want to have basic understanding how I organized things here, like folder structure and how to change up things in general, how to use it, then please watch the tutorial of audio reactive effects without any number. So that's the first pack. I explained things there, but here I will talk about the assets here, what you can do with them, and also what I've updated for 5.2. So just let's start here. So again, here are tools for audio capturing and audio playback. You can use that at runtime. You don't need those if you want to do a movie render. Then you just add audio to the movie render, to the level sequence. That's the first of the effects. It's called floating shapes. So you can define how they move and how they look and the colors. And you can also set the materials. Let me see, material interface is the material that is used for the meshes. Then you have outline and wireframe material, so you can enable outlines and wireframes, and you can set the meshes here, so you can change the meshes. But you have to also tell it which of the meshes to use, so you have 0 to 4, and let me see, if you type in type, you can type maximum is the maximum of 0 to 4, so of the meshes, and minimum is the minimum, and in between it takes the meshes. And yeah, you can also have a texture and define the type of the mesh by texture. So at the point in the texture where it's fully white, it will take the maximum, and at the point where it is black, it will take the minimum, and in between it will interpolate. And then also what I see here, what you also have is something called podest. So let's see if it's enabled for one of those. Yeah, here it's enabled, so that's like a thing in the background, another mesh. You can also change the material of those, enable them, and switch out meshes if you want to. And yeah, here you see the wireframes, and let me see, outlines. That one has outlines as well. And I just added a ton of variations of those, because I really like them, especially with those color gradients here. By the way, if you want to switch colors, always type index, color curve index. That's what you're gonna use. There are color curves, and there is a curve atlas that refers to the number of the curve in this curve atlas here. So open that up, see what you want or change that, and then you can select it here. Okay, there are a ton of those. I really like those. Okay, let's go on to the next. Okay, that's the same but in 2D. Instead of a mesh, it's planes with procedural graphics on it. So you can also, let me see if I added, I have haven't selected that. Select, yeah, okay. So again, you should be able. That's weird. Materials are not found in searches, because I know there is search for something that has a drop-down box with a string in there. So material trail, that's the material for the trail. You see, it doesn't find that for some reason. Okay, so for the actual material, there is no yeah, I see. Okay. Yeah, if you want to change the texture, you need to go into that here. Create a copy of that or select anything you want. Always have a look at the materials, how they work, because if you go in there, here, those dynamic parameters, that is how the particle system interacts with the material. So, for instance, emissive, diffuse, what else do we have here? Rotation, and so on. Okay, but other than that, the movement is similar to those other ones, so you can copy the movement. Then tumbling shapes. Here we have shapes again, and they are rotating, and you see they're blinking depending on the audio. By the way, there is an audio running here, but I've turned the sound down because it's a loop and it's getting really annoying. If you know the pack already, you know what I mean. I think I even used the new one for the update. Okay, and here, that one, River of Shapes, that's my absolute favorite effect in that pack. And it's so super versatile because, again, you can use the texture to define how that looks. So the texture defines which frequency of the spectrum is used for each pixel, and the height and color and so on, so many things. So, and here that's just a noise texture, and here that's a phase texture, so you can use whatever you want. And in addition to that, you can style it in so many ways. So there's too much going on, but those work really well, I think, with music. Just if you don't have all the other things in the background. And this one is, I especially like the colors of this one. Okay, and here are a few other variations. You can turn on some kind of canyon function, and also another thing that's called waterfall, that's just like this. Here you see also different textures used. And again, you can turn on outlines, which you see here slightly, red outlines, and wireframes. Okay, then the next two are sine trails, so it's just sine waves creating particles. And yeah, those are called GPU because they use meshes and they run on the GPU, but now the ribbons can also run on the GPU, so the name is not valid anymore. Yeah, you can just set which frequency each of those lines belong to and how the colors react, and the parameters of the sine curves. And then the last one is called torus flow. I also like those very much because they create torus shapes, multiple torus shapes that you can animate. So see if we're here, for instance, those small things here, that are all torus shapes. So you can also change it to look like that. And those in particular, if I turn on the fade value debug, so I have a look how they are gonna fade out if you use the fade out. I will show that later. That looks crazy. Okay, and here are also a ton of variations of those. And again, you can use a texture to define, like, imagine the texture is wrapped around the torus. Like this one is the X direction and around it is the Y direction. And again, you control all the particle behaviors by this texture. Okay, so that's it. I added a lot of new variations of those particle systems, and there's a lot to use out of the box already. But there are other things that I changed, and let's get to that. So I take this one here, and okay, so there are those parameters that start with LVJ. Those are kind of master parameters, and now all of the particle systems, or I think at least most of them, if not all, use those, and they help to control it. So first, let's start with the animation part. So animation speed is, yeah, you can make it faster or slower. Okay, but if you want to control the speed from the sequencer, you can check animation manual. You will see it's now not animating anymore, but you can control this anim percentage value from the sequencer and drive it from there. So you have the range from 0 to 1, and you can animate that however you want, and you can be sure that it's gonna loop. So if you can have a sine from 0 to 1, for instance, or just let it go like a sawtooth from 0 to 1, that would all work. And by the way, if in some cases it does not produce a looping animation, then probably some other parameter regarding any speed or frequency is not a full number, but has a floating point part. So if you search for speed, that here, for instance, that could cause it to not loop, yeah, or frequency. But in general, I set all of them up in a way that they will loop, just for you to troubleshoot if necessary. Maybe you changed something and now it's not looping anymore, now you know why. Okay, then that's for the animation. And then we have emissive. So that's the master emissive. If I turn that to 0, okay, interesting, it's still emissive. Why is that? Because, oops, emissive. If you type in emissive, you get all emissive related parameters. And you have always a minimum and maximum, and it's living in that range. So if I set that to 0 now it's black. That's the minimum now. So I go back. Okay, so let's turn the master emissive to 1 again. Then we have emissive audio. That means how much of the spectrum affects the emissive properties of the particles. So if I turn that to 0, the audio is ignored and each particle is maximum emissive. Usually you don't want to have that. If you turn it to 1, the emissive property depends 100% on the spectrum. So if there is no audio, it's dark, or it's at the minimum emissive value. So if you want to have it without audio still visible, take something like 0.8 or something. But I leave it to, put it to 1. Okay, then fade percentage, that's for fade out and fade in. So the range is -1 to +1. 0 meaning it's actually running. So it's intended to be used like fading it in from -1 to 0, and then when you want to fade it out from 0 to 1. And there is this. So if you type fade, you get all fade out related parameters, because you can style how it's gonna fade out. And if you're gonna do that, you will most probably check this fade value debug. You see, now it plays that animation and you can work on it. So that's the fade out animation. Okay. Oops. Good, and the last one here is spectrum to animation. Okay, that's at 0, so spectrum has no influence to the animation. If I put that to 1, you see it's now not really moving. Let's search for spectrum to animation strength. So let's turn it up to 10. No, let's use 20. Okay, so now when it gets audio input, it's driving the animation. If it doesn't get input, it's not doing anything. And the important thing here that all those effects, they have 2 spectrum analyzers. So the first one analyzes 1 frequency, which is global frequency. So it's all based on minimum and maximum. So 0 means the minimum, 1 means the maximum. Global frequency at 0 means we're listening to the bass here at 100 Hertz. So if I get a signal here, the animation is pushed forward. If you want to do a looping animation, don't use that. Unless you don't have audio, then it also doesn't make any sense. However, okay, good. And then there is a second spectrum that has bandwidth start and end, also with respect to those values here, and that is for each particle. So each particle has its own frequency, and here you set the range. So with start and end, you set the range. So if I set the end to 0.3, it's mostly listening to the bass in the audio up to, let's say, the snare or something. If I set it to 1, it's the full range. But usually in the heights, there's not that much interesting stuff going on. Okay, and another important parameters for the spectrum are the decay, which means the smoothing. So more decay means more smooth. 0 is, you see, it's reacting directly to the audio, very flickery, and if I increase that, it gets smoother. And yeah, don't do a value of 1. That doesn't make any sense. Then it won't work anymore. So it needs to be 0 to something below 1. Then you have the threshold of the global and the individual spectrum. That means if the audio is below this threshold, then nothing happens. That you want to use that to filter noise. So 0.1 is good for just filtering a low noise that's even there if it's silent. Okay, and then you have multiple values where you can say spectrum to something. And there are so many parameters, you just need to play around with that. Okay, so that's it. I hope you know how to use that a little bit better now. And I hope you create wonderful music videos with those assets. Have fun.